I always thought blood was thicker than water, until my parents rewrote their will to leave everything: the house, the land, the savings to my sister. Not even a single photo album for me. No explanation, no warning, just a cold, unsigned email from their lawyer. At first, I thought it was punishment for living my own life, for moving out, for being too independent. But then something didn't sit right. The way they always looked at her with pride, the way they looked at me like I was a guest in my own home. So I did something I never thought I'd do. One night, while visiting for dinner, I quietly took a sample of hair from my dad's jacket, a used glass from my mom. I sent them to a DNA lab, and what I found out destroyed our family more than any will ever could. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever been told to just get over it, then you need to hear this story. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. I'm Rachel Carter. I'm 29 years old. And for as long as I can remember, I've always been the other daughter. Not the golden child, not the miracle baby, just Rachel. My sister Chloe is 4 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to be 4 times more adored. While I worked 2 jobs and fought for scholarships just to survive college, Chloe was getting $500 handbags for making it through a rough week. When I saved for 2 years to buy a used Honda, she got a brand new Audi for her 17th birthday. When I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in biomedical engineering, they clapped politely. When Chloe passed one class at community college after failing out twice, they threw her a dinner party. And maybe, over the years, I learned to fake a smile at it all. But the truth, you never really get used to being invisible to the people who made you. It didn't start out obvious, it never does. When I brought home straight A's, they'd nod and say, "That's our Rachel, always so responsible." But when Chloe got a B-, they celebrated like she had cured cancer. "Baby, you're improving. We're so proud of you." And when I dared to question it, when I asked why everything she did was met with applause while my success was met with silence, I was told I was overreacting. "Rachel, stop comparing. Chloe just needs a little more support. She's going through a rough patch right now. Always an excuse, always a reason." And I swallowed it, because I was the good one, the steady one, the one who cleaned up after everyone else's mess. I packed Chloe's lunch when Mom forgot. I drove her to therapy when Dad said he was busy. I covered for her, lied for her, protected her. I raised her more than they did. And still, I got silence. No affection, no recognition, no real love. But I didn't rebel. I didn't throw tantrums or get in trouble. I moved out at 18, got into a good college, landed a solid job at a medtech company. I built my own life, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me. Not as the backup daughter, not as the burden, but as someone worthy of pride. Then the email came. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. I saw the subject line and thought my heart stopped. Carter Family Estate. Final execution notice. I opened it, half expecting someone had passed away. But instead, it was a formal notice that my parents had finalized their will. And every single asset: house, land, investments, cash was being left to Chloe. Not a single item for me, no heirlooms, no photos, not even the lake cabin I helped repaint every summer with Dad, not even the piano I learned to play on. Nothing. I stared at the screen for a full minute, willing it to change. I left the meeting mid-sentence and locked myself in the nearest restroom. And there, under the harsh fluorescent light, I asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. A question so dark, it felt like a betrayal just to think it. Am I even their daughter? Because this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This wasn't a Chloe needs more help situation. This felt deliberate, cold, final. It felt like erasure. I called my mom that night, heart pounding, voice trembling. She answered cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. Oh, hi. Honey, Chloe's here. We're watching The Bachelor. Can I call you back later? I forced myself to stay calm. I got an email from your lawyer. I said flatly, silence. Then a soft, sheepish, oh, that. I asked. Is it true you're giving everything to Chloe? Another pause. Then, sweetheart, you're doing so well. You don't need anything from us. That word needed echoed like a slap, as if love, respect, fairness, those things were now financial transactions. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't want their money, but I did want to matter. I said, You couldn't even tell me yourselves, she replied. It's better this way. You always take things so personally. And that was it. That was all she had to say. I hung up. No goodbye. No thank you. Just silence. And in that silence, something broke in me. A lifetime of being told to be the bigger person. A lifetime of shrinking myself so Chloe could shine. And now, this being written out of my own bloodline. No, I wasn't going to cry into my pillow this time. I wasn't going to journal my way through the pain. I was going to find the truth. Because somewhere, deep inside, a terrible suspicion had begun to grow. A whisper I couldn't silence. What if I was never supposed to be theirs? And just like that, the decision became clear. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need a fight. I needed answers. So that Friday, I accepted an invitation to dinner at my parents' house. I smiled, made small talk, complimented the roast chicken, and when no one was looking, I took a hair from my father's coat and collected a used glass from my mother's place at the table. I slipped both into a sealed bag in my purse. And that night, I sent them to a private DNA lab under a false name. No one knew, not my friends, not my boyfriend, not even me, fully, because the version of myself who did that, she wasn't someone I recognized yet. She was someone being born. They said results would take 7 to 10 days. But nothing would prepare me for what came next. The DNA results came in on a Monday. I had been checking my email non-stop, refreshing the inbox like an addict, even in the middle of meetings. I couldn't think straight, couldn't sleep. Part of me hoped it would all come back normal, that I'd been paranoid, that the will was just a cruel oversight. But deep down, I knew. I just knew. I was alone in my apartment when the email arrived. I hadn't told anyone. Not my boyfriend at the time. Not my best friend. This was something I had to face on my own. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, my hands cold against the glass, my heart beating like it was trying to escape my chest. I clicked the link. It opened with a simple greeting, "Hello, and thank you for using ClearTrack Genetics. Your results are now available." I scrolled. Biological mother Susan Carter, 99% match. Okay, no surprise there. But then I scrolled further. Biological father, no match found. I stared at the screen, refusing to blink, as if looking away would change it. I refreshed the page, opened it in a new tab. Same result. No match, no record, no connection. Just a clinical note at the bottom. Potential misattributed paternity. I read those 3 words over and over. Misattributed paternity. The coldest phrase in the English language. A euphemism for your life is not what you thought it was. A quiet way of saying the man who raised you is not your father. My mind went blank. And then came the flood. Every childhood memory, every harsh look, Every cold shoulder from my father suddenly felt different. It wasn't just emotional distance, it was knowledge. He had always known. He knew I wasn't his, and he treated me accordingly. I used to think he was just a distant man. Now I realized he was rejecting something he never claimed to begin with. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the summers at the lake cabin, the birthdays where he barely looked at me, the science fairs he skipped, the way he always leaned in when Chloe spoke but never turned his head when I entered the room. It was never favoritism. It was rejection in disguise. And I had never seen it. The next morning, I tried to be strategic. I sent him a text. Casual. Easy. Hey Dad, I'm working on a genealogy project and I need a quick DNA sample for ancestry purposes. Totally optional, but would be cool if you helped. Let me know. I waited all day for a response. It finally came that evening. 4 words. I don't see the point. That was it. No questions, no curiosity, no effort. Just a flat refusal. I sat there staring at the screen, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sad. I felt fury, the kind that makes your whole body go quiet. Because that wasn't the response of a father who was confused or skeptical. That was the response of a man who already knew the answer and didn't care if I did too. 2 days later, I drove to their house. No warning, no invitation. I just pulled into the driveway and walked up to the front door like a soldier going into battle. My mother opened the door with a bright smile, wearing her robe and holding a glass of tea. Rachel. What a surprise. Come in. We were just watching something funny. I stepped past her. My father was on the couch, eyes locked on the television, pretending not to see me. I stood in front of them both. My voice was calm, too calm. I took a DNA test. My mother's face froze. My father didn't flinch. I continued, "It says Dad isn't my biological father." The room fell into a silence so sharp, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. My mother's hands trembled, just slightly. She sat down without saying a word. Then finally, she looked at me and said, "Rachel, I never wanted you to find out like this." So it was true. I turned to my father. "Is that why you always treated me differently?" He didn't answer, just sat there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the screen. I repeated it, louder. "Is that why you never came to my graduation? Why you never once told me you were proud?" Still nothing. Then finally, he muttered, "I raised you. That should have been enough. That should have been enough." I felt something in my chest fracture. I looked at my mom. Her eyes were watery now. "I was young," she whispered. "It was just a short separation between your dad and me. I didn't even know for sure at first. And by the time I did, it felt too late. We had already moved on. I didn't want to break what we had rebuilt. So instead, they broke me. You let me grow up thinking I was less." I said. "You let him look through me like I was invisible. You watched it happen and said nothing." She wiped a tear. "I didn't know what to do. I turned back to my father. You punished me for something I didn't choose, for something she hid. And now you're fine cutting me out of your lives completely." He stood up. "You've made your choices. You left. You didn't need us. You made sure I didn't." He didn't respond. I pulled an envelope from my bag and tossed it onto the coffee table. "I found him," I said. "My biological father." That got their attention. Their heads snapped up, eyes wide. But I didn't stay long enough to answer the questions forming in their throats. I walked out the front door, climbed into my car, and slammed it shut. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't imagining things. I was the product of a lie. But that lie was about to unravel completely, because the man who might be my real father was still out there. And I was going to meet him. It took me 3 days to open the envelope. I had ordered the extended background report through the DNA service, something they offered discreetly. For cases like mine, cases where identity wasn't just a question of ancestry, but survival. The report included a name, a photo, a location, and a list of relatives, people I might share blood with, but had never met. I kept the envelope on my nightstand. I'd walk past it each morning, glance at it like a stranger sitting in my house, and keep walking. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But the truth doesn't wait for readiness, and neither does pain. On the fourth morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down on the edge of my bed, and opened it. His name was Robert Fields, 56 years old, retired Navy engineer, never married, no listed children, lived just over an hour away, in a quiet suburb I'd driven past a dozen times. His photo was grainy, but clear enough, kind eyes, salt and pepper hair, a strong jawline, and a left-leaning dimple in his cheek that matched the one I'd spent years trying to hide on my own face. My breath caught. It wasn't just the resemblance, it was something deeper, a feeling, recognition without introduction. The report said the match was 99.98% certain. I stared at the name again. Robert Fields. My biological father. A man who had no idea I existed. A man who might reject me, or embrace me, or worse, feel nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed rehearsing 1,000 conversations in my head. What do you say to someone you've never met, but whose DNA lives inside you? Do you say thank you? Do you ask why, or do you simply say, "Do you remember my mother?" I picked up my phone at 2 a.m., typed and deleted his name in the search bar, typed again. Finally, I found a phone number landline and an old listing on a veterans registry. I saved it. The next day, I dialed the number 6 times before I let it ring. On the 7th, someone picked up. "Hello?" His voice was deeper than I expected, calm, measured. I froze. My tongue turned to concrete. "Hi. Is this Robert Fields?" A pause. Then, "Yes. Speaking." My throat tightened. I know this is going to sound insane, but I think I might be your daughter." Silence. For a moment, I thought he hung up. Then came a single word. "What?" I took a breath. I did a DNA test. Through ClearTrack Genetics, it matched me to you. My mother's name is Susan Carter. She told me nothing. I didn't even know you existed until last week. Another long silence. Then he exhaled hard, like he'd been punched. Jesus Christ. His voice cracked, not in anger, but something else. Grief. Or maybe memory. Susan Carter. He repeated, "Yeah, I remember her." He didn't ask for proof. He didn't demand a name or deny it outright. He just paused, then said, "She disappeared on me. Back in the day, I didn't even know she was pregnant." I could barely speak. Neither did I. Not until a week ago. He cleared his throat. "You want to meet?" I said yes before I even knew I had spoken. We agreed on neutral ground, a diner halfway between our cities. Public, safe, simple. That Saturday morning, I left early. Even though I only lived 40 minutes away, I needed the drive, needed the space to breathe. I wore a blue sweater and black jeans, simple, unassuming. I didn't want to overdress. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. And yet, when I arrived, I still checked my reflection in the car mirror 3 times before stepping out. The moment I walked into the diner, I saw him. He stood when I entered, holding a mug of coffee, hands trembling slightly. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "I'd recognize that face anywhere," he said softly. I sat down. "Hi." We didn't hug. Not yet, but something passed between us. Something quiet, ancient, a thread, pulled tight. Over eggs and toast we didn't touch. He told me everything. He met my mother when they were both young. She was 23, he was 26. It wasn't serious, at least, not to her. But to him, it had meant something. They dated for a few months, long enough for him to fall in love. One day, she disappeared, stopped returning his calls, no explanation. He thought she'd just changed her mind. "I had no idea she was pregnant," he said. "Not even a hint. If I'd known." He trailed off. I believed him. I really did. He didn't seem like a man making excuses. He seemed like a man unearthing something buried long ago with trembling hands and an open heart. Then he asked, "Did Martin know?" I hesitated. He suspected, but they never talked about it. Not out loud. He nodded slowly. "That tracks." "What do you mean?" He leaned in. "Your mom and Martin. Their relationship was a mess. At least back then. She used to come to my place in tears. Told me he was cold, controlling. I honestly thought she was leaving him, and maybe she meant to. But something pulled her back. Probably fear, or family pressure." I swallowed hard. She never told me any of that. He looked at me for a long time, then reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded photo. "There's something else." He handed it to me. It was a picture. Chloe at about 15 standing in a living room I didn't recognize. Smiling, happy, next to another teenage girl I'd never seen before. "That's my niece," he said. "That photo was taken in my sister's house." I blinked. "Wait, Chloe knew your family?" He nodded. "They used to hang out. 8, maybe 9 years ago. I didn't put it together until after you called. I saw her name in your file and remembered my niece mentioning a Chloe Carter back in the day." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're saying my sister may have known who you were before I did." "I don't know how much she knew, but the connection is real. Too much to ignore." I sat back, my heart racing. If that was true, if Chloe had known something, anything, and said nothing, then this wasn't just a story about being left out. It was a story about betrayal. Because if she knew, and she let them write me out of their will, if she let them erase me from my own family tree while smiling at me across brunch tables and holiday dinners, then this wasn't just about parents hiding a secret. It was about a sister protecting it. And I needed to know why. Robert reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Whatever you decide to do next, I'm here. You don't owe me anything, Rachel, but you have me now, for as long as you want." That was the first time in years that I felt something I couldn't name. Maybe not joy, not yet. But something like belonging. But Chloe, she was next. And this time, I wasn't going to ask gently. I was going to demand the truth. I didn't call her. I showed up. I needed to see her face when I said it. Needed to look her in the eyes and know, really know if she had known all along. Chloe lived in one of those downtown high-rises with a view of the skyline and rent she didn't earn. I buzzed the intercom once, then again, fingers shaking. Finally, her voice came through, sharp and lazy. "Yeah. It's Rachel." A pause. Then the door unlocked. She opened the door in an oversized t-shirt and silk shorts, barefoot, skin glowing like she'd just rolled out of a luxury spa. "You could have called," she said flatly, leaning on the doorframe like this was some casual visit. I didn't want to call. She looked me over, then stepped aside. Fine, come in. The apartment was spotless. Lavender candles, glass table, one of those fake inspirational quote prints on the wall, good vibes only. I nearly laughed. We sat across from each other. No hugs, no tea, no warmth, just tension. I didn't wait. I know. She blinked slowly. Know what? I took a DNA test. Martin's not my biological father. She didn't even flinch, didn't gasp, didn't pretend to be surprised, just gave a tight-lipped smile and looked away. I stared at her. You already knew, didn't you? She said nothing. How long, Chloe? Still nothing? Don't play dumb with me. Finally, she sighed and got up, walking toward the kitchen as if she suddenly needed to clean something. Does it matter? Yes, I said, standing now. It matters a hell of a lot. You let them cut me out of the will. You watched them erase me and said nothing. She turned, eyes sharp. You left, Rachel. I left because I was tired of being invisible. No, you left because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. I laughed, bitter and cold. You were always the center. I cleaned up after you, lied for you, covered your messes, and they still chose you. She crossed her arms, defensive now. You've always been dramatic. I pulled the photo from my purse, the one of her and Robert's niece. I tossed it onto the counter between us. Explain this. She looked at it, then back at me. So, you were in Robert's sister's house. You knew. You knew who he was. You knew the truth. She picked up the photo and stared at it. Her voice dropped. I overheard Mom and Dad fighting when I was 16. He shouted something about how I wasn't even his. I asked Mom later and she broke down. She said it wasn't my place to say anything. You've known since you were 16. She nodded. I stepped back, dizzy. And you said nothing, all these years. She didn't speak. You let me believe I was crazy. You let them look right through me and shrugged it off. I didn't want to blow up the family. You didn't want to lose your position, I snapped. That's what this was. You didn't want to lose your grip on being the golden girl. Her jaw clenched. I never asked for all of that. No, you just accepted it, like you always do. She stared at me, eyes burning. You think you're so righteous, Rachel, so moral. But you're just as selfish as anyone. You wanted control. You wanted their love on your terms. You couldn't accept that maybe I needed it more. I laughed, but it came out cracked. Needed it more. You got everything. You were handed love like it was air. I had to earn it like oxygen in a burning room. She stepped closer. And still, you think you're the victim? I didn't steal someone else's life. Neither did I. I shook my head. Then why didn't you stop them when they changed the will, when they handed you everything and cut me out without a word? I didn't know they'd do that. But you didn't stop them either. She looked away. I found Robert. I said, I met him. Her eyes widened. He's kind, honest. He didn't know I existed. She looked like she might cry, but I didn't care. Not this time. He showed me a picture of you in his sister's house, smiling. You didn't just know. You visited his family. Chloe sat down, suddenly small. I didn't think you'd ever find him. Well, I did. And now I'm going to court. I'm contesting the will. She looked up sharply. You're what? You think I'm going to let you and your perfect little world erase me? No, not anymore. Her voice cracked. Rachel, please, don't do this. You already did, years ago. I turned to leave. She stood up, panicked. Wait. I paused at the door. You can keep the house, I said. Keep the inheritance. Keep pretending you earned all of it. But you don't get to keep my silence. And then I left. Not just her apartment, but her shadow. The next morning, I walked into the office of Evelyn Tran, estate attorney, Ivy League graduate. And from what I'd heard, someone who didn't just win, she dismantled. Her assistant barely had time to offer coffee before Evelyn herself emerged from her office. Sleek black suit, short silver hair, eyes sharp as scalpels. "Rachel Carter," she asked. I nodded. "Let's talk." We sat across a long mahogany table as I laid out everything: the will, the email from my parents' lawyer, the DNA test results, the photo of Chloe at Robert's sister's house, even Robert's signed paternity acknowledgement. Evelyn listened without interrupting, just occasionally nodding or scribbling a note. When I finished, she leaned back and said simply, "This isn't just a family dispute, this is structural erasure." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the papers. "They didn't just leave you out of the will. They built a legacy narrative around your absence. And from what you've told me, that wasn't an accident. That was engineered." I sat back, breath catching in my throat. She continued, "In most states, a parent can disinherit a child. But if we can prove undue influence, concealed paternity, or a long-term pattern of exclusion tied to misrepresentation of identity, then we have grounds to contest." She tapped the table. "It's not about money. It's about personhood." That word hit me like a bell. Personhood, being seen, counted, belonging somewhere other than the margins. "I want to move forward," I said quietly. Evelyn smiled just slightly. "Good, because I already have." By the end of the week, formal notice was served. Rachel Carter was officially contesting the Carter family estate on the grounds of concealed paternity, psychological exclusion, and potential fraud in the structuring of inheritance. The filing made waves, bigger than I expected. 3 days later, Chloe called me not to apologize, not to beg, but to tell me she'd hired her own attorney, and that she planned to fight. "It's your word against theirs," she hissed over the phone. "You're not a victim, Rachel. You're just jealous." I hung up. The calls started then, from extended family, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some called me brave. Most called me ungrateful. One aunt said I was trying to humiliate my parents in their final years. Another said, "This is why they always trusted Chloe. You've always had a flair for drama." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because Robert did. He called me that weekend and said, "I want to do something." I didn't know what he meant until we met again for lunch, and he handed me an envelope. Inside was a notarized letter and a copy of his new will. He was leaving everything to me. "I don't have much," he said, "but what I do have, I want you to inherit. Not because of revenge, not because of guilt, but because I want the world to know that you're my daughter, fully, legally, permanently." My throat tightened. "You don't have to do this." He looked at me gently. "I know. That's why it matters." I didn't cry then. But later that night, sitting in my apartment with that envelope in my lap, I did. Weeks passed. The case built momentum. Evelyn gathered statements from childhood friends, old teachers, even neighbors, people who'd seen the favoritism, who'd noticed how I was always the one left behind. We compiled email threads, calendars showing missed birthdays, photos of Chloe's lavish celebrations next to mine, tiny cupcakes on a kitchen counter. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was evidence. Then came the moment I'd been dreading: deposition day. We met in a conference room downtown. Chloe showed up in heels and designer sunglasses, flanked by her attorney. My mother came too, sitting stiff and quiet beside Martin, who didn't look at me once. I sat across from them with Evelyn and a court reporter, trying to keep my hands from shaking. My mother was asked directly, "When did you find out that Martin was not Rachel's biological father?" She hesitated. "I always knew, but I didn't think it would matter." "And yet, you didn't tell her, even when she was excluded from your will." "She was doing well. She didn't need us." That word again, need, like love was a scholarship you had to qualify for. Evelyn asked Chloe, "Did you know your sister was not Martin's biological daughter before the estate planning was finalized?" Chloe's jaw flexed. I had heard things, but I didn't think it was my place. "Did you inform your parents that Rachel had the right to know?" "No." "Did you believe she deserved a share of the inheritance?" Chloe looked at me, not after what she did. "And what was that?" "She left us." Evelyn leaned forward. "She left. After being neglected for years, after never receiving equal love, time, or acknowledgement. You think that justifies erasing her from the family line?" Chloe didn't answer. Then Evelyn produced the DNA results, the acknowledgement from Robert, the documentation of years of silence and imbalance. When it was all laid out on the table, literally and legally, the mood in the room shifted. Even my mother's face changed. By the end of that session, something inside me had already settled. Not anger, not pride. Relief. 3 months later, the ruling came down. The court determined that the original estate plan was structured in a way that showed long-term psychological exclusion resulting from concealed biological information. I was to be reinstated as an equal beneficiary. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just stood outside the courthouse that day, staring at the clouds above the skyline, and thought I exist. Not as a mistake, not as a secret, but as a person with a name, a father, and a voice. That night, I lit a candle, opened a bottle of wine, stood by the window of my new apartment, the one I paid for, the one I chose, and for the first time in years, I felt still. But the story wasn't over. Because a week later, I got a letter from Chloe. And what she wrote shook me more than the courtroom ever could. It arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, printed cleanly across the front of a cream-colored envelope. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another legal update or maybe a note from the court. But the second I opened it and saw the handwriting inside slightly slanted, familiar loops and long crosses, I knew it was from Chloe. My stomach turned. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the first line for a long time before I could make myself keep reading. Dear Rachel, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, maybe forever. And I won't blame you if you rip this up before finishing it. But if you're still reading, that means part of you is still willing to hear me out. So I'll try to be honest. Not performative, not defensive, just honest. You were right about everything. About how Mom and Dad treated us differently, about how I let it happen, about how I benefited from it, and especially about how I knew. I've known for a long time. Since I was 16, to be exact. I heard them fighting one night. It was bad. Dad yelled something like, "She's not even mine." I pretended I didn't hear, but I did, and I never forgot it. At first, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought maybe it was just a figure of speech. But then I asked Mom a few days later, and she froze. She told me it was complicated, that I shouldn't worry about it, and that it wasn't my place to say anything. And I listened. Not because I believed her, but because it gave me power. That's the truth I haven't admitted until now, not even to myself. Knowing the secret gave me leverage. It gave me something you didn't have. And for once in my life, I felt like I had the upper hand. That sounds disgusting, I know. But I need you to understand why. I spent my entire childhood watching you be good at everything. You got straight A's. You were responsible. You were driven. Everyone, teachers, friends, strangers looked at you and saw potential. With me, they saw chaos. A pretty mess they hoped someone else would clean up. I felt like a burden in every room except at home. At home, I was the one they protected, coddled, chose. And I clung to that like a life raft, even when I knew it wasn't fair, especially then. You always seemed invincible to me, like no matter how much they ignored you, you still stood tall, you still achieved, you still had dignity. I never had that. I faked it, but I was always scared, always waiting for someone to see through me. So when the will came up, and I realized they were rewriting everything, I stayed silent. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the backup. I was the chosen one, and I didn't want to give that up, even if it meant betraying you. I've played that moment over in my head 100 times. I could have spoken up. I could have said, Rachel deserves better. I could have told you the truth years ago. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, because quiet served me. And now I see what that silence cost. It cost you a childhood full of doubt, a sense of identity, a place in your own family, and it cost me you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Rachel, I don't deserve it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What I'm asking is simpler. I'm asking that you believe me when I say, I never hated you. I envied you. I resented you. But I also admired you more than I ever let on. You were strong enough to walk away. You were brave enough to look for the truth. And you were honest enough to call me out when no one else would. I've started therapy. I'm trying to understand why I hurt people who love me, and why I let fear guide so many of my choices. It's hard. Some days I feel like I'm peeling skin off my own soul, but I'm doing it, because I don't want to be this version of me anymore. I miss you. I miss having a sister. And I miss the version of us we never got to be. So if there's ever a day when you feel ready just to talk, just to sit, just to exist in the same space, I'll be here. Not as the golden child, not as the liar, just as your sister. Love, Chloe. I sat with the letter in my hands for over an hour. I didn't cry at first. I didn't move. I just felt. Felt everything she had said, everything she hadn't said, and everything between the lines. Her handwriting had changed since we were teenagers. It was softer now, less certain, and in a few places, the ink was smudged like maybe she had cried while writing. And maybe that's what broke me. Not the words, but the fact that she finally felt it. That night, I didn't sleep. I just laid there, thinking about how much pain we had both carried, different kinds of pain. But pain nonetheless. Mine from being forgotten, hers from never knowing who she really was without their validation. For years, we had been trapped in opposite corners of the same house, fighting invisible wars while pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I sat at my desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I stared at it for a long time. Then, with hands that no longer trembled, I wrote 5 simple words. Let's meet, just to talk. I took a photo of the note. And for the first time in nearly a year, I texted my sister back. We met at the park, neutral ground. No pressure, no expectations. I chose the time late afternoon, just before golden hour when the light is soft and nothing feels too sharp. Chloe was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench by the pond. She looked different, not glamorous, not performative, just real. Her hair was tied back loosely, no makeup, wearing a simple cardigan and flats. She stood when she saw me, but didn't move to hug, just nodded and said quietly, "Hi." "Hi," I said back. We sat down side by side, not facing each other, not touching, but not turning away either. Ducks moved slowly across the water. Somewhere behind us, a child was laughing. The silence between us was heavy, but not unbearable. She broke it first. "Thanks for coming." I nodded. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again." "I didn't either," I replied. She gave a soft, sad smile. "Fair." A breeze passed through the trees. Leaves rustled above us. I finally turned my head slightly to look at her. "I read your letter." She glanced down. It wasn't easy to write. I could tell. She swallowed. "Rachel, I know I can't undo what I did. I can't rewrite how I treated you, or how I watched you disappear and did nothing, but I'm trying. I really am." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the perfect daughter, or the selfish child, or even the girl who hurt me. I saw someone cracked, struggling, trying to rebuild herself from pieces she didn't understand. "I'm not angry the way I used to be," I said. She looked surprised. "You're not?" "No, I'm tired of being angry, of carrying pain around like a shield. It never helped. It just kept me alone." Chloe's eyes glistened. I was alone too. Even when I had everything, I still felt hollow. We were quiet again. Then she whispered, "I'm pregnant." I turned, "What?" She nodded. 17 weeks. His name's Lucas. It's complicated, but he's kind, patient. He knows everything. I didn't say anything. She added, "I want to do this differently. I want to raise this baby with truth. No secrets, no roles to perform, just love." I nodded slowly. "That's good." Then she turned to me, really looked at me. "I want them to know they have an aunt. If you're willing." My throat tightened. I didn't answer right away. The instinct to protect myself rose again, to stay guarded, to say no. But then I saw her hands resting on her belly, nervous, hopeful, terrified. And I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means choosing not to let the wound keep bleeding. It means saying, "I remember, and I'm still here." So I said, "Maybe we can try, not as the sisters we were, but as the women we're becoming." Chloe wiped her cheek. "I'd like that." We didn't hug. We just sat there, side by side, watching the ducks drift across the pond as the sun dipped low behind the trees. We weren't healed, but we were no longer broken in silence. And that was enough. 1 year later, Chloe gave birth to a little girl. She named her Hope. She asked me to be the godmother. I said yes. Robert still calls every week. Sometimes we talk about books, sometimes about weather. Sometimes we just sit on the phone and breathe. Both of us amazed we found each other at all. He never tries to make up for lost time. He just shows up. And somehow that's more than I ever thought I'd have. My parents were civil, distant. They never apologized, not really. But they listen when I speak now. I don't expect a fairy tale ending. I've stopped expecting hurt, too. Some wounds never close, but we stop picking at them. We stop living inside them. We learn to grow around them like trees cracking through concrete. Bent, maybe, scarred, definitely, but still reaching for light. And me? I'm still building, still healing. But I no longer look in the mirror and see the girl they left out of the will. I see the woman who rewrote her place in the story. who uncovered a truth meant to stay buried, who chose voice over silence, and family over legacy. Because sometimes blood isn't thicker. Choice is. If you've ever been made to feel like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever had to fight for recognition, for truth, for your place at the table, know this: you are not alone, and you are not wrong for wanting better. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your erasure. What you do owe yourself is the right to stand tall even if you have to build your family from scratch. Thanks for listening.